The outbreak of the Second World War saw many old soldiers step up and do their part, be it fighting on the front lines or keeping watch as members of the Home Guard. These were often former troops from World War I, and despite not entirely being fit for service, they did their best regardless. Alongside these old soldiers, however, were a few equally old locomotives that also earned their medals. In 1883, William Dean drew up plans for an 060 goods locomotive for the Great Western Railway. With 5-foot 2-inch driving wheels and a pair of 17 by 24-inch inside cylinders, his design broke the standard Great Western mould by giving the engines inside frames and fitting a large dome on the boiler. While not the most powerful goods engines, they did prove to have quite a light axle load and could average a respectable speed of 65 miles an hour, making them ideal for light freight work and even pulling various passenger services. By 1899, 260 of these engines had been built and were working all across the Great Western, though withdrawal of the class began as early as 1907 due to an excessive amount of them being built, with 20 being taken out of service and modified into the 3901 class for use pulling suburban passenger trains. It was around the turn of the century that the GWR began fitting them with new boilers and Belpaire fireboxes to improve their performance, but the class still managed to retain their light axle loads. It's likely this is the reason the Railway Operating Division chose them to aid in France during the First World War, as a quick, mixed-traffic engine that could run on any part of France's railway network was quite desirable for the army. 62 Dean's goods engines were sent to France in 1917 to aid the army, with 46 making it back to England in 1919. The remaining 16 went on to work in Greece, with 2 being sold off to Ottoman Railways, 5 being written off in Salonika, and the remaining 9 finally making it home in 1921. Back home, the Dean goods settled back into their light goods and passenger work, and after the grouping in 1923, they found themselves working on many branch lines that the Great Western Railway absorbed. The engines were slowly starting to be withdrawn during the 1930s, but the outbreak of World War II led to many of them being pulled back into service, with 100 being modified for use by the War Department. They had their automatic train control apparatus removed and were fitted with Westinghouse brakes, with 10 of them even having pannier tanks and condensing equipment fitted to help improve mileage. A further 8 were acquired by the War Department and 79 had been sent to France when Germany invaded. The retreat to Dunkirk resulting in many locomotives either being destroyed or captured by the Axis forces. Out of the 79 engines that had made it to France, 24 were veterans of the First World War, having already worked on French rails. Of the survivors, 55 remained in France working on the northern and western regions of the French network, having their cab roofs extended and being fitted with air tanks for braking. The rest made their way east through Germany and ended up scattered around Poland, Germany and Austria. In 1943, 6 engines were sent to Tunisia to be deployed in Italy after the Allies took over, while the ones that remained at home continued to serve the War Department, shunting and pulling munitions trains to and from factories and doing just about any work that was needed. Despite being 40 years out of date, the Dean goods proved to be flexible and reliable workhorses for pretty much every railway they worked on. Their tenders gave them good range, their axle load meant they could go anywhere, their speed made them ideal for quick delivery, and their mixed traffic nature meant they could handle just about any job, be it moving passengers, freight, or even just shunting. The design, though antiquated, was still simple and straightforward to both operate and maintain, only helping with their longevity. They were by no means perfect. The Victorian-era cabs provided crews with little protection, and one can imagine that the controls being on the right side of the cab would have caused some headaches abroad. Their limited power also caused them to quickly become overshadowed by the British and American austerity 280s that flooded the railways of both Britain and mainland Europe after D-Day, which were not only much stronger, but greatly outnumbered the Dean goods too. Once the war was over, many of the Dean goods engines that were overseas simply remained abroad, with the engines in Italy, France and Austria staying in their respective countries until the end of steam. One even fell into Soviet hands for a while before its eventual retirement. Of the ones left in France, between 22 to 26 were patched up and sent over to China for relief work, where they too remained for the rest of their lives. Quite far east for a Great Western engine. Out of the 260 built, 54 fell into the hands of British Railways. Despite being old, the Great Western found their flexibility made them near impossible to replace on branch lines. Even when Charles Collett produced his own 060 engines in 1930, these proved to be too heavy, and so the Deans had to stay. British Railways too simply kept using them until they produced their own lightweight mixed traffic engines in the form of the Class 2s. These very quickly took over the Dean's work, and by 1955 only 4 of the Dean's goods remained in Britain, with the last of the Italian and French-owned Deans being withdrawn around the same time. The last of the 2 that ended up in Greece after the First World War also vanished by 1955, and by 1957 the last of the Dean's goods were withdrawn by British Railways. When the last of the Chinese Deans were withdrawn is unknown. Despite the huge role they played both at home and abroad, only one engine has been preserved, number 2516. To my knowledge, 2516 never left the country in either war, spending most of its life working on the branch lines of mid-Wales. It's truly a shame that none of the other Dean's goods that went abroad were preserved. Considering these were engines built for fast and light mixed traffic work in the 1880s, the fact they not only served in the First World War after surviving 30 years, but went on to work for another 20 years before serving in yet another war is an impressive feat. Were they considered out-of-date veterans in need of replacement and in way over their heads? Of course. But so was Dad's army, and they seemed to do alright. Subscribe for more.